Welcome back to Fast Money. Insmed trading at highs not seen in a quarter of a century after the company clinched FDA approval for its first-in-class drug treating a form of chronic lung disease. The company estimating the drug could top $5 billion in peak sales for this indication alone, with a patient population of as many as 500,000 in the U.S. Joining us on the set for more is Insmed CEO Will Lewis. Will, welcome back.
Thanks.
Congratulations on the FDA approval. This is the first DPP-1 inhibitor for non-cystic fibrosis bronchiectasis.
Well done. Yeah, it is.
So in layman's terms, what is that? What does this drug do?
Well, yesterday was a very important day for patients with this disease. Bronchiectasis is a condition that has been around and diagnosed since 1819. So for more than 200 years, companies have been trying to develop a drug to treat this disease and have all failed until yesterday. And so this really marks a breakthrough for patients with this condition.
You, in your press release, put out a total addressable market potentially of $5 billion in sales. There are higher estimates. Guggenheim, for one, has an estimate that's $7.3 billion, and they say that the market could actually be bigger because with FDA approval, it brings patient awareness, and doctors may be more willing to diagnose the disease, the problem, if there is a treatment. Would you agree with that there is that sort of elasticity to how you think about the TAM?
I would, and I would say that when you think about the 500,000 patient number, that really represents patients who are diagnosed today. Behind that number, there are patients with other comorbidities that may also have bronchiectasis, but because of a lack of availability of any drug, have never been diagnosed as such. A good example of that are patients with COPD or asthma. We had roughly 18% of our patient populations in the clinical trials that had that comorbidity that were benefiting from the drug. And that opens a very substantial door because there are 32 million people in the U.S. that have COPD or asthma. So if some portion of them also have bronchiectasis, they would be on label for the use of the drug.
You recently raised $750 million for the commercialization of this drug. Is it your intent to go it alone, or would you still be open to partnering?
We will go it alone.
Okay.
This is our second drug that has been approved, and so the commercial infrastructure that we have in the U.S., Europe, and Japan is directly relevant to this effort because that drug calls on pulmonologists. This drug calls on pulmonologists, so we're getting the benefit of that leverage from that existing sales force. Now, we've augmented it quite a bit for this launch, but I always like to say that this is really just the beginning. You mentioned DPP-1 as a mechanism. Beyond bronchiectasis, we're studying it right now in 2 other disease indications, CRS without nasal polyps and HS, both of which will read out in the next 12 months.
The analyst community is starting to figure it out. You mentioned, I think, Mizuho, Goldman Sachs, a lot of people raising price targets. First of all, congratulations. Second of all, I think when you first came on here, $50-ish stock, you see where it is now. 3 major drugs, $25 billion market cap. You start doing the math and thinking about where this should be. I mean, you're probably, and I know you don't want to play the game, but your 4 or 5 turns probably still too cheap, given what the outlook could be for those 3 names specifically. You want to sort of speak to that?
Sure. Well, each of these drugs that we're talking about, Arikayce or brensocatib, or the one that we just put out data on, which had me on the show the last time, TPIP, they all have not only their initial indication, but the possibility of broader applications in other disease states. DPP-1, as an example, we like to refer to that as a skeleton key that may be able to impact any neutrophil-mediated disease. And so while we're targeting those first 3, we have since developed some 850 additional formulations of DPP-1s that we'll be bringing into the clinic starting next year, going after diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and irritable bowel disease. So this is really just the tip of the iceberg.
Basically, we think about DPP-1 as an enzyme that has to do with inflammation. So inflammatory diseases,
yes,
that's sort of the way to think about the skeleton key.
Yeah, and it applies very broadly. So CRS without nasal polyps affects, obviously, the nasal passage. HS is a dermatologic condition. So while they appear unrelated to one another, it's the fundamental biology that you're touching when you unlock something like that. The opportunity is enormous. Think about PD-1, think about GLP-1s and the opportunity that they represent. This is the kind of mechanism that I think we've unlocked.
Wow.